Hey y'all, how you doing? Welcome or welcome back. If you're new, my name is Corey and welcome to another Design With Me video during Vlogtober. If you're not new here, shout out to you. This will be a different format from my other videos of this nature, only because I'm only doing vlogs this month. We gotta keep it simple, casual even. So go ahead and grab you a snack or something to drink. I should do the same. I have no groceries, never mind. Today I'm going to walk through a little bit of my process when I do stylescapes. Stylescapes being one of the very first pieces of creative that I start with a client when working on a branding project or something of that nature. I'd say it's similar to a mood board, but more detailed and more specific to this client. New location because my audio got a little messed up, but I was basically saying that they're similar, but you're manipulating things a little bit more to tailor to a specific brand. Sometimes for me, it's a combination of both, but you know, I do what I want, you do what you do. Okay, so the very first thing I work with is typically finding hero images. The hero image would be the representation of their target audience. So if they are targeting millennial Black women who work in corporate in New York City, and they have this much income, whatever their target audience is, I find images that I think match or fit those personas. All of this is happening, this creative is happening after we've already gone through a strategy process, so I have a good idea of a lot of these things that influence what I'm putting on the stylescape. The thing about the stylescape is that I'm trying to create one seamless thing, more so than a collage, but really just like this one board symbolizes what your brand could overall look and feel like. And so there is a bit of editing involved versus a mood board. You're just like finding images and putting them on the page all together in a way that's presentable. In this case, I'm gonna find the images that represent those personas. I'm cutting them out. I'm editing anything that needs to be edited. Sometimes I may go as far as to change the color of their outfits so that it reflects the branding that I'm presenting. You get what I'm saying? Believe it or not, this isn't hard to believe because I think this is kind of like stepping outside of myself. This is something that could easily be mistaken, but if I put a hero image on a stylescape and the girl has on a pink shirt, but the brand is meant to be dark, cool tone, all that stuff, a client may see that and say like, hey, I love this, but I really don't like that pink because it's on the stylescape and that's your fault. You should have changed your shirt. So anyway, I'm editing these pictures and I'm going to add them onto the stylescape. I usually present them towards the left side just because we're naturally looking left to right. One of the first things that we see, I want to be reminded, and I want the client to be reminded of who we are designing for, because it's not them and it's not me. It's whoever's in that photo. Even farther left on my stylescapes, in fact, the farthest left, I include a logo. Now at this point, we have not gone through a logo design process, but I like to put some of my concepts on the stylescape, one on each, right? That'll help kind of start that conversation there while we're looking at the overall look and feel, and they can kind of see it all coming together in a way. But during my process, I typically at minimum look for fonts as if I'm going to do a word mark for their business name. And so that way, that would kind of represent the logo at this point in time. By the time I present it to a client, that may change into an actual logo concept that I've come up with. But for now, in the development, I am looking for typefaces, fonts that I may want to include in each particular concept. In this instance, now that I think about it, I did show y'all before my Milanote board for this client in a previous video. And so on this Milanote board, you can kind of see some of my research in terms of like design styles that might fit in with the strategy that we came up with. So a couple of the directions that I thought about going in based on what we discussed were a nostalgic and warm type of look and feel, because the brand story was very much rooted in family and like a childhood story and all those things. And then alternatively, we may have gone in a clean and luxurious kind of feel because he did want the look and feel to be reflective of the types of consumers that he wants to attract, which makes sense. So while I'm looking at these typefaces, I'm looking for one or the other or a combination of both. As usual in my process, once I see some typefaces I like, I'm downloading all of them and I'm going to type out my type with all of them just to see what they all look like. You know, we got to play fair. At no point in time while I'm doing this whole process do I have final decisions made. I'm really just workshopping and brainstorming as I go through, but because I have this structure, it makes it easy for me to lean more towards certain decisions than others. So me seeing my hero image there, me picking out my color palettes and seeing how they work together, in combination with the typefaces I've selected. You get what I'm saying. Next, I'm working on the color palette. At this point, I'm either separately building these palettes or I already had an idea of what direction I wanted to go in, based on some of the research that I've done, based on, like, I know I'm doing something nostalgic. These are colors or these are hues that I feel like represent that. Things like that. At this point, I probably already have an idea, I'm sure. In this instance, I had an idea. You'll also notice while I'm building these two palettes, while neither one is like super in your face and like all over the place colorful, one is much more colorful than the other. I kind of felt like as I was going through the process, either direction worked with our target audience, but that's how it should be. And so I was just making sure that while I'm presenting these two different stylescapes to my client, that there were clear distinctions between the two. In this case, they never felt too far off from each other because we were so so much on the same page, I guess, during the discussions we had previously. So it was almost like clear and straightforward to me what should be done. But there were some things that we can make decisions on. Once my palettes are built out, I'm working on layout of the entire stylescape. And so I'm figuring out what else I'm going to include, how I'm going to place things, and I'm making sure that I incorporate swatches from the color palette throughout the stylescape so that, again, at first glance, you're getting an overall look and an overall emotion and overall something out of looking at this stylescape versus having to imagine what those colors look like together, you know? I definitely don't arrange everything the same every single time, as you may have seen, but I do make sure they know what they're looking at. So all of the swatches will be grouped together so that it's clearly a color palette. The mock-ups that I decide to include on each one remain the same, just aligned with whatever direction they're on, just so that we're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. We got to make it as easy and simple and clear as possible. I always want to make things for people who claim they are not creative at all, even though they likely are, even though they definitely are. There's always a level of education required in client services, and so presenting things and assuming someone knows what they're looking at is never going to work, ever. This is the part we are all a little more used to, is sourcing images that we would have put on a mood board and include them onto the stylescape. Now, this example, I am doing very minimal editing. In other instances, I might completely like wipe off, like in some of these, you'll see a card with words on it. I might completely remove the words and use that image as a mock-up itself and put something that's more aligned with the brand on the mock-up. For whatever reason, I opted out of that here. I opted out and it worked fine, but in some instances, I do think it's more beneficial to edit as much as possible because you do want to make it a little more specific to the brand. I think it just helps visualize things so much more than a mood board ever could. These images I'm pulling may be anything from design styles that I think would work well in those specific instances. They may also be photography styles. They may even be images that allude to graphic elements. So on here, I did include, as part of the process, I did include an image of photo strips onto the stylescape. This is a photo booth company. I ultimately decided that I did not want to be too on the nose like that with the photo strips, but when I first put that image in there, it was to kind of tie back to a graphic element. You know, as I'm doing this, I'm also brainstorming myself, so some things worked, some things didn't, and some things made the cut, some things didn't, but at the end, the photography style ended up being something that I also wanted to include on there anyway, just to have a conversation about it. On the far right of these stylescapes is where I started to play with typography and showing kind of like the hierarchy of our type and what a full paragraph might look like, or what I'm imagining the type of type that we would use for this direction might look like. I do edit these to use actual copy that matches the brand versus using Libsum. If you do need help, we have AI now. Use ChatGPT, use Gemini, use whomever to get you some copy. Again, we want to be specific. And then I definitely make sure that my mock-ups apply to collateral that they actually would be using. If I have a client who has no intention on having a website at all, they're just old school, brick and mortar, no digital presence whatsoever, it makes absolutely no sense for me to put a website mock-up or an app mock-up or a social graphic on their stylescape to represent what their brand could look like. Doesn't make sense. In this instance, website was very, 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 very important to him. So I made sure that I mocked up a website or something of that nature. Now, I was not designing the website, so that's not up to me, but I can show what all of these elements and some of these things might look like all together on a website. For example, on that first stylescape, we're leaning more towards nostalgia, memories, documenting a journey, things like that. And so rather than being on the nose as a graphic element with the photo strip, I did include something that is reminiscent of a photo strip on this website mockup. I did also include some handwritten elements so that we can lean more into that personal feeling. The photography style on the website feels more like what may come out of a photo booth or of a, what are those called? Disposable camera. And then on the second one, which is more clean and luxurious, we're using more like modern photography styles, very clean girl aesthetic, black and white, neutral type of base with pops of color, and the pops of color are still muted, clean. So we're just always keeping in mind the relevancy throughout. Ultimately, that is a general formula that I use. Now, when it comes to presenting this, number one, I've showed you this before, okay? But I'm gonna show you again. Like I said before, education always at the forefront. So number one, I always, unless scheduling doesn't permit on their end or something like that, and even then I try my best to send in a Loom video of me explaining it or something, I always present the stylescapes, because again, I'm not trying to send anybody anything with just a visual like, here, does this look right? I don't know. That's just me. It should also be you. And I always put everything in a deck. I've explained that before as well. All this stuff will be linked up here as I'm speaking. The deck that I present from and send to them after I present, at the beginning, it does have something like a key that explains what each element of the stylescape is. And so I always lead with that before I even show them theirs. And I also send that to them so that they're able to know exactly what they're looking at and why it's important. And it kind of helps guide their feedback. I also give them feedback guidelines at the beginning. You know. Guide the people. Teach them how to give you what you need. Help them help you help them. Obviously, if you do this or if you're incorporating it into your process, like I said, it looks different for me every single time. I have the general structure, but what comes out of it and how detailed it is and how I present it and all those things, it changes every single time. I work according to my clients and what they seem to work well with. It's kind of like being a teacher, right? You want everyone in your class to get to the same result, but some people got to get there a different way to others, myself included. Maybe I just work based on how I need to be worked with. But anyway, all that to say, if this is something that you incorporate into your process or you already do it, I am not one to say that it needs to be this way. I am calling this a stylescape. This may not be the way of the originator, but this is how I've done it and what has worked for me. So it does not have to be exact for how it works for you. But sharing this and sharing the structure with you all to kind of show you something that can help you build your own, or you can just do this exact same thing, whatever. I found it helpful. I actually introduced this part of the process to my last agency. We were not doing that previously, but when we started getting more into branding, and our branding was more so like campaign branding, but once we got into that, I moved away from mood boards and into stylescapes just based on the feedback loop and me trying to tighten that up and make it less like, just shorten the steps to get to the actual process of designing the things, you know? But anyway, now that I've rambled through my hunger and realized I have no groceries, no snacks, no nothing, Jesus, I'm gonna go take care of that. Leave a computer emoji down below if you made it this far, and I will be sure to see you in the next one. You better come back. If you're not subscribed already, matter of fact, subscribe, because my back hurts and it can't be without reason. See you in a couple days. Bye.